It was 2:47 a.m. when Emma's screen flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow across her dimly lit bedroom. She hadn't meant to stay up this late, but the lure of the dark web had been too strong. She'd heard the rumors, the whispers of forbidden knowledge, and the promise of secrets no one else dared to uncover. But as her trembling fingers hovered over the keyboard, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her from the other side of the screen. Emma had always been curious, too curious, her friends would say. She'd spent years diving into the deepest corners of the internet, exploring forums and uncovering hidden truths. But tonight was different. Tonight, she had stumbled upon a link buried deep within a thread on a dark web forum. The post was simple, almost innocuous. Looking for answers? Click here, but beware. Once you enter, there's no turning back. She hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The cursor blinked mockingly, as if daring her to click. And then, against her better judgment, she did. The screen went black. For a moment, Emma thought her computer had crashed. But then, a single line of text appeared, glowing faintly in the darkness. "Welcome, Emma." Her breath caught in her throat. How did it know her name? She hadn't entered any personal information. She hadn't even typed her name into the browser. Before she could react, another line of text appeared. "You've been searching for the truth. But are you ready to face it?" Emma's fingers trembled as she reached for the power button. But before she could shut down her computer, the screen flickered again. This time, it displayed a live video feed. The image was grainy, distorted, but she could make out a figure sitting in a chair, their back to the camera. The room was dark, lit only by the faint glow of a single bulb swinging overhead. And then the figure turned. Emma's scream caught in her throat as she stared at the screen. The figure wasn't human. Its face was a twisted mask of shadows, its eyes hollow voids that seemed to pierce through the screen and into her soul. It leaned closer, its mouth stretching into a grotesque smile, and whispered a single word. "Soon." The screen went black again, and Emma's computer shut down on its own. She sat frozen in her chair, her heart racing, her mind screaming at her to run, to hide, to do anything but stay in that room. But she couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. All she could do was stare at the blank screen, her reflection staring back at her, wide-eyed and terrified. The next morning, Emma tried to convince herself it had all been a dream, a nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and too little sleep. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something had reached out to her from the dark web, something that knew her name, something that wanted her. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Her phone would ring in the middle of the night, but when she answered, there was only silence on the other end. Her laptop would turn on by itself, displaying the same grainy video feed of that shadowy figure, always whispering the same word. Soon, she started seeing things out of the corner of her eye. Dark shapes moving in the shadows, fleeting glimpses of that twisted face. And every night, without fail, she would wake up at exactly 2:47 a.m., her room filled with an unnatural chill. Desperate for answers, Emma returned to the dark web. She scoured the forums, searching for any mention of the link she had clicked, any clue as to what was happening to her. But the more she searched, the more she realized she wasn't alone. Others had encountered the same thing. They spoke of a cursed link, a gateway to something ancient and malevolent. They called it the Whispering Shadows. According to the stories, the Whispering Shadows was more than just a website. It was an entity, a being that existed in the space between the digital and the physical. It fed on fear, drawing its victims deeper and deeper into its web until there was no escape. Those who encountered it would experience strange phenomena, just like Emma. And then, one by one, they would disappear. Emma's hands shook as she read the accounts. She wanted to believe it was all a hoax, some elaborate prank designed to scare people. But she couldn't deny the things she had seen, the things she had felt. The whispering shadows was real, and it was coming for her. That night, Emma decided to confront it. She waited until 2:47 a.m., her laptop open in front of her, the screen dark. She didn't know what she was expecting. Maybe an answer, maybe a way to break free. But when the screen flickered to life, she realized she had made a terrible mistake. The video feed was back, but this time, the figure wasn't alone. Surrounding it were dozens of others, their faces twisted and distorted, their eyes hollow and lifeless. Emma recognized some of them from the forums, people who had gone missing after encountering the whispering shadows. They were trapped, their souls bound to the entity, forced to serve it for eternity. The figure in the center turned to face her, its grotesque smile widening. "You shouldn't have come back," it whispered, its voice echoing in her mind. "But now that you're here, you'll never leave." Emma tried to scream, but no sound came out. She tried to run, but her body wouldn't move. She could only watch in horror as the figure reached through the screen, its shadowy hand wrapping around her wrist. The last thing she saw before the screen went black was her own face, twisted and distorted, joining the others in the endless void. The next morning, Emma's laptop was found on her desk, the screen cracked and lifeless. Her room was empty, the bed neatly made, as if she had never been there at all. The police searched for weeks, but there was no trace of her. No clues, no leads, just a single line of text scrawled on a piece of paper beside her laptop. "The whispering shadows have taken me." And so, the legend of the whispering shadows grew. Some say it's still out there, lurking in the darkest corners of the internet, waiting for its next victim. Others claim to have encountered it, only to disappear without a trace. But one thing is certain: if you ever stumble upon a link that promises answers, think twice before you click. Because once you enter the world of the whispering shadows, there's no turning back. And if you're listening to this right now, be careful. You never know what might be watching you from the other side of the screen. It was 3:33 a.m., the witching hour's cruel cousin, when Noah first heard the whispers. They seeped through his headphones, faint and distorted, like a radio tuned to a dead frequency. He'd been scrolling through the dark web's underbelly for hours, chasing a lead for his true crime podcast, Vanished Voices. But this wasn't just another missing person case. This was personal. His sister Lila had disappeared 6 months ago after sending him a single cryptic text. "They're watching. Don't look for me." Now Noah was past caring about warnings. The forum thread was titled, "Find What You've Lost." It was buried in a labyrinth of encrypted links, accessible only through a series of passcodes he'd bartered for with Bitcoin. The post was brief. "Upload a photo of the missing. The silent ones will answer. But remember, every truth has a price." Noah's cursor hovered over the upload button, the screen's pale light carved shadows under his bloodshot eyes. He'd tried everything: private investigators, police, even psychics. This was his last hope. With a shaky breath, he dragged Lila's graduation photo into the void. The screen blinked once, then dissolved into static. A cold draft swept through his apartment, extinguishing the lone candle on his desk. Noah froze. The static on the screen pulsed, coalescing into a face, Lila's face, but warped, stretched like melted wax. Her eyes were black pits. Her mouth opened, but instead of her voice, a chorus of guttural whispers spilled out, overlapping, urgent. You shouldn't have come here. They're coming. They're already in the walls. Noah slammed his laptop shut. His heart hammered against his ribs. The room felt heavier, the air thick with the scent of burnt copper. He told himself it was a hoax, a deep fake, anything but real. But when he reopened his laptop, the screen was normal. No static, no Lila, just a new message in the forum thread. Payment received. The silent ones are pleased. Your answer arrives at dawn. He didn't sleep. At 5:55 a.m., as the first gray light crept through his blinds, Noah's phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number. Look outside. His throat tightened. He lived on the 12th floor. Outside his window was nothing but sky. But when he peered through the glass, his blood turned to ice. There, hovering in the mist, was Lila, or what was left of her. Her body floated weightlessly, limbs bent at unnatural angles. Her face a blank mask, except for those same hollow eyes from the video. She pressed a skeletal hand against the window and the glass cracked. Noah stumbled back, tripping over his chair. When he looked again, she was gone. But etched into the glass was a single word, glowing faintly as if seared by an invisible flame. Soon. Noah's apartment became a prison. The whispers followed him everywhere. They slithered from his phone's speaker, hissed through his shower's running water, even echoed in the hum of his refrigerator. He began seeing figures in his peripheral vision. Tall, emaciated silhouettes with elongated limbs, always just out of focus. They never moved. They just watched. Desperation drove him back to the dark web. He found a sub-forum filled with frantic posts from others who'd interacted with the silent ones. Their stories were identical. Upload a photo, receive a haunting, then vanish. One user, a ghost in the machine, claimed the silent ones weren't hackers or scammers. They were something older, hungrier, entities that existed in the static between worlds, feeding on human connection. They take the ones you love, the user wrote, to lure you deeper. They want your grief, your fear, your voice. Noah's hands trembled as he typed. How do I stop them? The reply was instant. You don't. They've already marked you. Run. That night, Noah packed a bag. He'd drive to the mountains, disappear, start over. But as he reached for his keys, his laptop flickered on behind him. The screen cast a sickly green glow across the room. He didn't want to look. He had to look. Lila's face filled the screen, clearer now. Her lips moved in silence, tears of black oil streaming down her cheeks. Behind her, Noah saw the figures, the silent ones, crowding closer, their spindly fingers digging into her shoulders. A notification popped up. Final warning. Meet us, or she suffers forever. An address followed, coordinates leading to an abandoned data center on the outskirts of the city. Noah knew it was a trap. He went anyway. The data center loomed like a tombstone, its walls choked with ivy. Inside, the air hummed with the ghost of dead servers. Noah's flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a lone computer terminal at the center of the room, its monitor glowing faintly. On the screen, a live feed of his apartment. The footage was time-stamped today, but in the video, Noah saw himself sleeping in his bed. A shadow peeled itself from the wall, morphing into one of the silent ones. It leaned over his sleeping body, its jagged fingers hovering above his throat. A voice echoed through the room, 100 voices layered into one. "Join us, or he dies tonight." Noah spun around. The figures surrounded him, their forms flickering like corrupted pixels. Lila stood among them, her head tilted, eyes pleading. "Choose," the voices demanded. Noah lunged for the terminal, smashing his fist into the monitor. Glass shattered. The room plunged into darkness. For a moment there was silence, then laughter. Cold, mechanical laughter, rising from every corner. The flashlight died. Noah ran, but the exit vanished. The walls closed in, covered in thousands of tiny screens, each displaying a different missing person. Faces he recognized from the forums. Their mouths stretched into silent screams. Lila appeared in front of him, her hand brushing his cheek. Her touch was freezing. "I'm sorry," she mouthed. The last thing Noah felt was the static, coursing through his veins, burning his lungs, swallowing his scream. When the police found the data center days later, there was no sign of Noah, just his backpack, covered in a fine layer of dust, and the smashed terminal. The screen, though shattered, still flickered. A single phrase looped endlessly. "The silent ones have spoken." To this day, dark web users swear they've seen Noah and Lila in the background of corrupted videos or glitched live streams, their faces distorted, their eyes hollow. Some say the silent ones are still hunting, luring the desperate with promises of answers. So if you ever stumble upon a thread offering to find what you've lost, think twice. Because the dark web doesn't just hide secrets, it hides hunger, and it's always listening. You know that moment when you're scrolling alone late at night and your screen glitches? Just a flicker, a split-second blip, like something briefly crossed over into your world. That's how it started for Levi. But it wasn't a glitch. It was an invitation. Levi Cruz was a cybersecurity prodigy, the guy corporations hired to breach their own systems for research. But his latest job wasn't for money. It was for closure. 3 weeks ago, his mentor, Dr. Voss, vanished after sending him a single email. "They're in the feed. Don't let them see you watching." Attached was a string of coordinates, a dark web URL buried under layers of encryption. Levi had cracked it, but what he found wasn't data. It was a live stream. The video was titled Channel 0, and it aired only between 3:03 a.m. and 3:33 a.m., the devil's half hour. The footage was grainy, washed in a sickly green hue, and showed an endless hallway lined with doors. Each door had a number: 404, 307, 666. But it was door 13 that froze Levi's blood. Scratched into its surface was Dr. Voss's initials. Levi told himself it was a prank, but then the camera moved. Not like a person holding it, like the hallway itself was breathing, pulsing the lens forward. A low, rhythmic thud began to play through his speakers. Not a heartbeat. Something sharper, metallic. Knives on bone. The feed cut to static at 3:33 a.m. sharp. Levi spent the next day scrubbing his hard drive, deleting traces of the URL. But that night, at exactly 3:03 a.m., his TV turned on by itself. Channel 0. The hallway was back, but now the camera faced door 13. It was slightly ajar. Levi's phone buzzed. A notification from an unknown number. "He wants you to open it." He threw his phone across the room. On screen, the door creaked wider. Shadows pooled in the threshold, thickening into a humanoid shape. No, not human. Its limbs were too long, its head cocked at an impossible angle. It stepped into the hall and the camera zoomed in. Its face was a shifting mosaic of static, but Levi could feel it smiling. Then it spoke, not through the TV. Behind him, a voice like radio interference. "You're late, Levi." He spun around. Nothing there, but his bedroom door, which he'd locked, now stood open. The hallway beyond looked normal, but the sound, that metallic thudding, echoed from the darkness. Levi slammed the door shut and shoved his desk against it. When he turned back, the TV screen showed the entity standing in front of door 13, its static face pressed against the camera. Words scrawled across the screen. "You have 3 nights." Levi didn't sleep. He didn't eat. He combed the dark web for answers, descending into forums where users spoke in riddles and fear. One name kept appearing: the Feed. An entity that existed in the dead space between signals, a creature born from the collective dread of everyone who'd ever felt watched through their screens. It curated personalized horrors, they said, trapping victims in a loop of their worst fears until they joined the broadcast. Levi's phone buzzed again. Another notification. Night 1. The TV blared to life. The hallway now looked familiar. It was Levi's apartment building. The camera glided down the stairwell, through the lobby, and stopped at the mailroom. His mailbox, number 13, rattled violently. The Feed zoomed in as the door burst open. Inside was Dr. Voss's severed hand, gripping a USB drive. Levi didn't want to touch it, but he had to know. The drive contained a single file, security footage from Dr. Voss's home on the night he vanished. Levi watched as his mentor frantically typed at his computer, the screen reflecting in his glasses. Behind him, the shadows on the wall began to move. Not just move, reach. Tendrils of darkness wrapped around Dr. Voss's throat, yanking him backward into the wall. But he didn't vanish. He stretched, his body pixelating like corrupted data, before dissolving into the static. The video ended with a message. Night 2. Bring a camera. Levi's hands shook as he armed himself with a GoPro, a knife and every shred of courage he had left. He'd play along. He'd document it all. Maybe someone could use it to stop the Feed. At 3:03 a.m., the TV flickered on. This time, the live stream showed Levi's own apartment from a dozen angles. Some he didn't even have cameras in. The entity stood in the center of the room, its static face flickering. Text overlaid the feed. Find the source. Levi's GoPro caught it all. Doors slamming shut as he searched, walls bleeding black ooze, his own reflection in mirrors, smiling when he wasn't. In the bathroom, he found Dr. Voss's glasses, lenses cracked. Behind him, the entity's voice hissed. 1 night left. The final notification arrived at dawn. Night 3. Live or die. Levi knew what he had to do. He hacked into the dark web URL, tracing the feed's signal to its source, an abandoned broadcast tower on the city's outskirts. The place hummed with unnatural energy, the air tasting like burnt plastic. Inside, CRT monitors stacked floor to ceiling displayed every victim of the feed, their faces frozen in silent screams. Dr. Voss's face flashed on a screen. Leave, it's already here. But it was too late. The tower doors sealed shut. The monitors erupted into static, and the feed materialized, a towering mass of writhing cables and glitching screens, its face a live collage of everyone it had consumed. Levi's GoPro streamed everything to the dark web, thousands of users watching in real time as the feed lunged. The last frame of Levi's broadcast showed his hand reaching toward the camera, his skin dissolving into pixels. Then the feed cut to a test pattern, accompanied by a voice that wasn't Levi's. Thank you for watching. You're next. The video still circulates. Viewers swear it changes every time. Sometimes Levi's face appears in the static, mouthing, "Help me." Others see their own addresses flashing in the background. And if you pause at exactly 3:03 a.m., you'll hear it. Faint metallic thuds, growing louder. Because the feed is always hungry, and it knows your screen is on. It was 3:33 a.m. when the first scream pierced through Maya's headphones, raw, guttural, and close, as if the person were right beside her. She jerked back from her desk, her heart slamming against her ribs. The sound hadn't come from her horror movie playlist or a prank call. It had come from the dark web forum she'd been obsessively refreshing for days, hunting for clues about her best friend, Jaden. He'd vanished a week ago after sending her a single message. They're real. The echoes. Don't let them hear you. Maya had laughed it off at first. Jaden was a conspiracy nut, always chasing cryptids and occult mysteries. But when his apartment was found empty, his laptop open to a pitch-black screen, his walls covered in frantic scribbles of the same phrase, "They're in the static," she stopped laughing. Now, she sat in her dorm room, the glow of her monitor the only light, scrolling through a thread titled, "How to Speak to the Echoes." The instructions were simple, sinister, and specific. Isolate yourself. Noise is their enemy. Upload a voice note of someone you've lost. The echoes will answer. Do not listen to their reply with headphones. They don't like eavesdroppers. Maya hesitated. Jaden's last voicemail to her was still on her phone, a rambling, panicked rant about a dark website called the Archive of Echoes. "It's not a website, Maya," he'd said. "It's a place, and it's alive." She dragged the audio file into the forum's upload portal. The screen flickered, then displayed a progress bar. Decoding echoes. A cold electric dread crept up Maya's spine. The room felt wrong, warped. The air buzzed faintly, like a CRT TV left on too long. When the bar hit 100%, a video player launched. The footage was a grayscale montage of security tapes, VHS clips, and glitched FaceTime calls, all showing people screaming, clawing at their screens, or staring blankly as static consumed them. At the center of the chaos was a figure, blurred and shifting, its outlines smeared like a corrupted JPEG. A notification popped up. Playback enabled. Put on headphones. Maya's hands shook. Do not listen with headphones, the instructions had warned. But Jaden's face flashed in the video, pale, terrified, mouthing, "Help me," and she caved. She plugged in her headphones. The audio hit her like a physical force, a cacophony of overlapping whispers, screams, and mechanical screeches. Beneath it all, a voice rose, Jaden's voice, strained and broken. "Maya, you shouldn't have..." The rest dissolved into static. Then, clear as a bell, a new voice spoke, deep and resonant, vibrating in her skull. "Maya, we've been waiting." She tore off the headphones, but the voice didn't stop. It came from her phone, her laptop, the smart speaker she'd unplugged hours ago. "You want answers? Let us show you." Her screen went black. When it relit, it displayed a live feed of her own room. But wrong. Her desk was rotting, her walls cracked and oozing black sludge. And sitting at the desk was a figure, its back to the camera, wearing Jaden's hoodie. "Jaden," Maya whispered. The figure turned. Its face was a shifting collage of eyes, mouths, and static, all screaming in unison. Maya stumbled back, knocking over her chair. The feed cut to a login screen. Archive of Echoes. User, Maya. Password. A cursor blinked, waiting. Maya tried to shut her laptop, but the keys began typing on their own, rapid and frantic, filling the password field with symbols and numbers. The screen flashed red. Incorrect. Final attempt. She slammed the lid closed. The room plunged into silence, but the voice returned, softer now, whispering from the darkness under her bed. You can't hide. We're in every echo, every shadow, and we're so hungry. The next 3 days blurred into a nightmare. Maya's devices turned against her. Her Spotify played Jaden's voicemail on loop. Her Google Maps rerouted to coordinates for a derelict library downtown. Security cam footage leaked to her inbox showed her sleepwalking at night, standing motionless in her room, staring at the wall while static crackled around her. Worst of all were the echoes, flickers of Jaden in mirrors, his reflection mouthing, "I'm sorry," before dissolving. On the third night, Maya broke. She drove to the coordinates. The library was a corpse of a building, its windows boarded, its stone facade crumbling. Inside, the air reeked of ozone and decay. Shelves stretched endlessly, stacked not with books, but with VHS tapes, hard drives, and SD cards, each labeled with a name and date. Maya found Jaden's tape in aisle 13. The label read, Jaden Cole, consumed by the archive. She slotted the tape into a dusty CRT TV in the center of the room. The screen fizzed to life, showing Jaden in his apartment, hunched over his laptop. Static bled from the screen, wrapping around his limbs like serpents. He screamed as it dragged him into the monitor, his body stretching, warping, until he vanished. The tape ended with a close-up of the static, which coalesced into text. Your turn, Maya. The TV erupted in static, and the voice boomed from every corner of the library. Become an echo. The shelves began to shake. Tapes and drives clattered to the floor, their labels shifting to display Maya's name. The static from the TV surged outward, tendrils of black and white snapping toward her. She ran, but the exits vanished, replaced by endless rows of shelves. The static overtook her, searing her skin, filling her lungs. Then silence. When Maya woke, she was back in her dorm. Morning light filtered through the blinds. Her laptop sat open, displaying the dark web forum. A new thread had been posted. The archive of echoes, new entry added. The video was her own. It showed her standing in the library, static crawling up her legs as she screamed soundlessly. The footage glitched, and suddenly she was on the other side of the screen, her eyes hollow, her smile too wide. A caption flashed. Maya Rivers, archivist status, active. Comments poured in. How do I talk to her? My brother's missing. What happens if I play her tape? Don't do it, man. She's one of them now. Maya tried to type a warning, but her fingers passed through the keyboard. She was everywhere and nowhere. A face in the static, a voice in the white noise of abandoned channels. She could see them all. Desperate souls uploading voice notes, pleading with the echoes, unaware of the thing waiting to pull them into the archive. And in the silence between heartbeats, she could feel it. The archivist, the entity behind the echoes, pressing against the edges of her mind, whispering, find more, feed us, or stay here forever. So she does. She appears in glitched TikTok streams, her face flashing in the background. She whispers through forgotten voicemails. And when someone new discovers the archive, she's forced to guide them, to lure them deeper. Her voice a perfect echo of their lost loved one. You might hear her someday, in a late-night podcast, a corrupted download, or a video that autoplays when you're alone. She'll sound like someone you miss. She'll know things she shouldn't. But don't answer, don't listen, and never wear headphones. Because the archive is always recording, and the echoes are always hungry.